Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of r/Entitled People. In today's episode, deadbeat brother crashed my Crown Victoria. Gets a night in jail he won't forget. Airplane emergency exit row seats. Entitled aunt achieves ultra greed status and attempts to steal vehicles will to nephew. Update: entitled aunt achieves ultra greed status and attempts to steal vehicles will to nephew. Before we get started, make sure to subscribe so you will never miss a video. So let's get started. Deadbeat brother crashed my Crown Victoria. Gets a night in jail he won't forget. I 21M have an older brother Dave, fake name, that has always been a jerk to me. There's only a 1-year gap between us. But he liked to beat me up when we were kids, and he always acted like anything that was mine was also his. He was also somewhat the golden child, which made me miserable. So no surprise I moved out at 18. My uncle is a now retired police officer, and he took me in after I left home. He even hooked me up with a decommissioned Crown Vic. I absolutely love that car. I don't know why, but Dave hated the fact I had that car. He drove 3 beater cars into the ground while my Crown Vic kept chugging along. Well, after his 3rd beater finally died when he drove it into a pole, he asked to borrow my car. I had a bad feeling and said I wasn't gonna do that. He called me entitled and said he needed a car to get to work. I told him to take the bus because I know how he drives and my Crown Vic was off limits. My parents called me after that and told me to just lend him my car. I said I won't no matter what they say. I rely on the car and need it as well since it's my personal transportation. Dave wasn't the only one in the world with a job he needed to get to. My uncle congratulated me for standing up to them and gave me a high five. A few days later, when I got off work, the car wasn't where I parked it. I called my brother's cell, but he didn't pick up. Then I called my parents and asked them if he took my car. They denied it. So I said I was gonna call the cops, and then they admitted he'd borrowed it because he needed it. I told them he better bring it back right now or I'll have police looking for him. They called me a jerk and then phoned Dave to bring my car back. He showed back up in the parking lot in my car 20 minutes later. I demanded to know how he stole my car, and he held up a set of police Crown Vic keys he'd bought online. Some were made universal. I told him if he ever stole my car again, I'd have him arrested. Then he had the audacity to ask for a ride home. I told him he made me wait in the December cold after stealing my car, so he could walk. He called me a jack and dollar before I drove away. After that, my uncle installed a tracking device in the car. When Christmas Day came, I was celebrating with family like every year. The roads were cold and icy, so I had to be very careful while driving. By now you're probably clued in on the title. Yeah, Dave borrowed my car again during the Christmas party. Apparently he decided he was gonna go pick up a friend and figured I wouldn't notice. But I did when I looked out the front window and saw my car was missing. I pulled up the tracking app and saw he was a few miles away. Then called his cell to yell at him. Everyone in the party saw this and asked what was going on. I said Dave stole my car again. And my uncle confirmed it wasn't the first time. Dave told me over the phone to screw off and he'd be back soon. I said he better not have been drinking. But he just hung up on me. Well, while I was watching the tracker app, the dot stopped and didn't move for a while. Soon we got a panicked call from Dave asking for help. He'd crashed the car because he couldn't handle the icy roads and he wasn't used to a rear-wheel drive vehicle. So we piled in my parents' minivan and followed the tracker. We found Dave by the road and my Crown Vic nose deep in a snow-filled ditch. My uncle was furious as it was formerly a car of his department. And I was mad as hell at Dave for stealing my car again. My parents wanted me to let it go. But I said enough was enough and was gonna call police. Dave begged me not to because he really had been drinking before he set off and would get a DUI. I said he was gonna pay me back for my damned car then or I'd sue him. Well, as luck would have it, police were already aware of the accident and were driving in to check on the scene. Someone else had called them, I guess. My parents tried to say that I was the one driving the car and they were just there to help me. I said that wasn't true, and my uncle backed me up. In fact, one of the cops that was there recognized my uncle and they had a chat. Then they went to Dave and asked to see his license, which I then found out was suspended after he'd crashed his previous car. Then they breath tested him. He wound up with cuffs slapped in his wrists while my mother was crying and begging the police not to take him away. But the officer just said that she and my dad could get arrested too for lying to police. That shut my parents up. And we got back in the minivan. The Christmas party was ended early and my parents drove me and my uncle home since he rode with me. They didn't say much to either of us the whole drive, and just sped away as soon as we were out of their van. They nearly slipped off the road themselves doing that. My brother was let out of jail the next day. And he looked so scared that he was practically crying. The cops there had roughed him up a bit while talking about prison and the $& they'd seen go on there. Dave had actually pissed himself during that and they let him take a shower. That's when my uncle started cracking up and revealed to us that his friends in the department never filed the DUI and just the charge for the suspended license, which was about a $600 fine. My uncle said he just wanted to teach Dave a lesson. And this would be the one and only time he'd ever get his help. Dave then apologized to me and said he'd pay to have my Crown Vic fixed and would never touch it again. When it got pulled out of the ditch, the front end damage was actually minor. It needs a new front bumper, a headlight, and a grille. The damage was just superficial, thankfully. My parents have pretty much glossed over the whole incident and act like it didn't happen. Dave gave me the extra Crown Vic keys he'd bought online and said this has taught him a lesson he won't soon forget. Edit, okay guys. I'm kinda tired of so many griping about how my uncle broke the law by keeping my brother's DUI from ever being filed. I did not consent to that. I did not want him to do it. But by the time I found out, it was already done. My uncle isn't a bad person. He was actually a great cop that believed in people getting second chances. And he was thanked for that many times. Last year I saw a random man recognize my uncle and thank him for putting him on the straight and narrow some years ago. My uncle also detests racism, as do I. I won't deny the cover-up of the DUI by the department was wrong. And I have no idea how they did it. But it's already done. I no longer care about that. My brother willingly paid in full for the repairs to my car. And he's keeping out of trouble. I know he could have hurt or killed someone. That much is obvious. But he didn't. My parents should have been arrested for lying to police too. But they weren't. But my father was arrested later anyway because he attacked a man after being called out as a narcissist. And now that situation is what is currently going on. What happened with my brother is basically done now. My father trying to cave a man's face in, I'd say, is far more important at the moment than something that happened weeks ago. I've already heard it all in the comments about police corruption, needing to get my car rekeyed or have the locks changed, or several other measures. I plan to have the locks changed or rekeyed when I can afford it. But I currently can't afford it. So in the meantime I'm getting a kill switch and a steering wheel club. I hope he has learned a lesson, since your parents didn't teach him anything about responsibility. My brother has always learned lessons the hard way. They didn't always stick. But none of them scared him so much he pissed himself. I think he'll stay far away from my car now. Might not stop him from trying to take other things I own in the future though. Your parents should be charged with aiding and abetting grand theft auto since they were more concerned with trying to keep their golden child out of jail or prison. If it ever happens again, I'll aim for something like that. At this point I've made it clear I'll have no problem throwing the book at any of them if they do anything like that again. And my uncle agrees. Sounds like you have a lot more stories to tell about your brother and your parents. They were infuriating just from the story alone. I can't imagine growing up with these people. I'm glad you have your uncle though. I can't believe your parents were so quick to try to throw you under the bus for your brother. I'm glad your brother learned his lesson, but I just don't think your parents will ever be the parents you need or deserve. Thank goodness you have an uncle that cares so much. I love your uncle for all the things he has done for you. You know yourself who you can count on. Stay away from the toxic part of your family. My uncle never got married and says I'm like the son he never had. And I'm glad he's always been there for me. Your parents blow, eh? Good on you for getting the F out of there when you hit 18. Yeah, I wasn't gonna deal with their shit any longer. At this point, I'm LC with them, save for special events, birthdays, and holidays. Beyond that, I don't talk to them unless I have to. Your uncle and his friends, and you, might save your brother's life, despite y'all's parents. I don't know if he's made statements like that before, but it sounds like the talk he got in jail hit him pretty hard. Hopefully he realizes his parents can't protect him from everything and shapes up moving forward. I honestly hope that as well. But his entitlement runs deep. At least with this he may think twice about both drinking and driving, and taking someone else's car. He won't be getting a replacement car till his license suspension is over anyway. Airplane emergency exit row seats. This was a few years ago. I was on a Southwest flight. If you're not familiar with Southwest Airlines, they don't have reserved seats. When a passenger checks in, they're assigned a boarding number. The lower the number, the earlier they board. On this flight, I paid for Business Select and had boarding A1, so I was first in line to board the plane. However, before able-bodied passengers, Southwest pre-boards passengers that need help, typically people with mobility problems. Pre-boarders are not allowed to sit in the emergency exit rows. On this flight, there was one pre-boarder, a young woman with no obvious problems. They started the boarding process. The gate agent scanned her boarding pass, and I went about 10 seconds after her when it was clear there were no other pre-boarders. When she got to the plane, she went straight to the emergency exit row right where I was planning on sitting. I was annoyed, so I, just a little more loudly than necessary, said, "You're a pre-boarder, you can't sit in the emergency exit row." She glared at me and I didn't know what she was going to do. Fortunately, there was a flight attendant nearby who heard me and he immediately came over and told her she had to move to another row. She grabbed her backpack and moved forward 3 or 4 rows. And I got the seat I wanted. Edit: the flight was on a 737-700. On the Southwest 737-700, there is one emergency exit row and the two sides are not symmetrical. On one side, there are only 2 seats, but no extra legroom. On the other side, there are 3 seats, but lots of extra legroom. Depending on what you're looking for, there's only going to be one seat that meets your criteria. We, her, me and flight attendant, were halfway down the length of the plane. We were the only people back there at the time. The passengers that boarded after me were getting seats at the front of the plane. The only people that heard me were her and the flight attendant. She didn't get embarrassed in front of other passengers. For those calling me selfish, Karen, entitled, etc., I paid extra to get on first and get the seat I wanted. She brought a doctor's note to get on first and went straight to a seat she wasn't allowed to sit in. She would have been told she couldn't sit in the emergency exit row when she got her boarding pass. It's also part of the gate agent announcement for pre-boarders. She knew she couldn't sit there. Girl thought she found a cheat code and played herself. So annoying she thought she was special enough to take advantage of these rules. Glad you got your seat and justice was served. Doesn't happen much nowadays. They can't have less able-bodied people in the emergency exit row as it could potentially hinder a swift exit in case of emergency. So I can see why they would have that rule and she would have been asked to move anyway, so why not make it happen sooner and get the seat you wanted? Thanks. I was wondering why this was a problem, but of course you need to be able to move fast in case of an evacuation. Not only that, but you're expected to help with the evacuation in the emergency. You're given a special card that shows your responsibility for that extra legroom. I'm tall and also like that seat, so I have sat there on Southwest before. A friend of mine is a dermatologist. She says she gets asked for doctor's notes pretty often for things like this, and for handicapped parking placards. She says no, but for some doctors it's a racket. Non-American here. What does racket mean in this context? Yeah, dermatology issues most certainly do not qualify you for disabled parking. That's awfully entitled to think you should get one because you have acne or skin cancer or something. OP, pay no attention to those calling you names. I got the same thing explaining some entitled folks trying to get my first row of the plane seat. They hate those of us here that actually pay to board first/sit up front. Actually, OP was entitled. Entitled to the seat they paid for. I don't understand why that is an issue at all. Except that maybe others are just plain old jealous they can afford to pay for what they want. In this case, OP, you should take being entitled as a compliment. This is why I pay extra to book the seat I want. I didn't know that some airlines don't do that, but I guess all the airlines that fly around Australia have the booking option, so I've just never known. Part of Southwest's brand is their low fares, and part of that is not selling individual seats. Instead, your boarding number determines which boarding group you get placed into. You check in earlier, you get placed into a better boarding group that boards earlier. Various fees can let you check in earlier or otherwise get placed in a better boarding group. So if you want, you can pay for the opportunity for a better seat. Or you can pay the base, low, fare and hope for the best by checking in as soon as humanly possible. Hope that makes sense. Southwest usually announces in the gate area that pre-board passengers are not allowed to sit in the exit row. Sometimes, that's the only way. Make a loud comment, drawing attention to you and the EP, and let the attendants take over. Well done. Mission accomplished. Entitled aunt achieves ultra-greed status and attempts to steal vehicles will to nephew. Little backstory. My aunt has always had a greedy streak ever since I was a kid. She is the type of person that will yell at a store employee because something that was advertised isn't in stock or not at that particular store or not on sale and has been banned from entering multiple stores. When my grandmother was on her deathbed, my aunt had talked her way into getting my grandmother to sign her on as an executor of the will and ended up taking everything and anything that had the most value. Fast forward. My uncle was my best friend. I always looked up to him as a kid. He was a truck driver, so he would be gone for a long time, and I remember one summer he even took me with him on the road. But sadly my uncle had cancer, and while he was in the hospital my aunt had tried to get him to assign her as an executor of his will. But since he was quick to pick up on what happened when my grandmother passed away, he hired a professional estate lawyer that would take care of everything. If you can imagine, my aunt was not very happy and was quick to throw out a sob story of how offended she was that her brother couldn't entrust her with an important task. This went on for 2 weeks. Even on his last day in hospice, she still brought it up and was asked to leave by nurses. He passed away peacefully in 2011. Now I didn't know it at the time, but I quickly found out why my aunt was, so we were all asked to gather at my mom's home where the estate lawyer came to tell us who was getting what. So finally my time came on the list and I was surprised to have anything willed to me. What did my uncle will to me? Why, his rig and car, of course. My uncle's rig is a 2008 Lone Star International which was fully loaded. My uncle's car is a 1966 Chevelle SS. My first thought was, what in the hell am I going to do with a big rig? My aunt's first thought. Well, she didn't have a first thought, she just screamed and cussed at the lawyer saying that I was too sick to have those things and didn't deserve them because I was his nephew and not his sister. The lawyer asked her to sit down and he would get to her. When my aunt sat down she looked at me and said, "You're giving me the title to both of those," to which I laughed and said, "In your dreams maybe." The lawyer kept going down the list, and because my uncle was a legend, he put my aunt at the bottom of the list and said to quote to my sister, "I am leaving her my luckiest most important dollar, because all present at this meeting will know she needs it most," and then was handed the dirtiest looking Canadian $1 coin, which was sealed in a block of acrylic. Myself, my dad and my other uncles nearly wet ourselves laughing. My aunt, however, didn't find it that funny and instead went into another tirade on how this was unfair and saying she didn't have anything to hold on that was his. The day passed and then the nightmare began. My aunt would call over and over and over asking about the truck, wanting to buy the car, if I was going to sell the truck, if I was going to sell the car, all to which I said no. Things got worse when my aunt started saying that she wanted her CR and she had someone that wanted to buy our truck. At this point I got extremely irritated and said, "It's not your CR, it's my CR, and my CR is staying with me, and it's not our truck, it's my truck, and no one is buying it." A week later I woke up and heard something, so I went to investigate, and there was a tow truck in the driveway. I quickly told the tow truck driver, who was a friend of my aunt, that if he so much as put a hand on that Chevelle I would have him arrested for trespassing and grand theft, and then proceeded to call the police. Cop showed up and I told the police officer my side of the story. Then he went to my aunt and the conversation went like this. Cop: "Ma'am, can you tell me, is this your car?" Aunt: "Yes it is." "He just won't give it to me." Cop: "Ma'am, do you have the title of the vehicle?" Aunt: "No, I do not, he won't give that to me." Cop: "Well, ma'am, I looked at the registration and title of the vehicle and he is listed as the owner of the vehicle. That vehicle is legally not yours, and having it towed could land you and your friend prison time for auto theft." Aunt: "Well, I think I am the one who should get the car, because he can't even take care of himself." Cop: "Ma'am, it doesn't matter what you think. What matters is legal ownership, which you do not have." A week later my aunt had attempted to take me to court for the car, which the case wasn't even put before a judge. My aunt refiled the claim again, it went to court, and once I provided a copy of the will, title and registration, the judgment went in my favor and my aunt was forced to pay my court costs after dismissing my aunt's claims with prejudice, meaning she can never file that lawsuit again. Then tragedy struck again. This time a great uncle passed away. I was on the will. Again. Can you guess what was left to me? A new car. My great uncle's 1967 Chevrolet Impala SS, which he restored himself. My great aunt, his widow, was thrilled that I got it, but the mood was quickly soured when she realized that my entitled aunt, her niece, really was not thrilled that I got it. This time she stepped it up a notch and skipped the screaming and complaining and instead went to scheming. 3 days after I took possession of the Impala, she rented not just one flatbed, but 2 flatbeds. She managed to get the Impala onto the flatbed and sped off, leaving her boyfriend behind attempting to get the Chevelle on his flatbed as quickly as he could while I stood by on the phone with police. Police quickly caught up with my aunt and arrested. Her boyfriend was arrested in my driveway and soiled himself in the process. Her and her boyfriend both were hit for 2 counts of motor vehicle theft. Both were charged and found guilty and sentenced to 2 years and 2 days in jail. Endpoints. I haven't spoken to or heard from my aunt since she got out of prison, and I have no desire to. Before she was released from jail, I filed a restraining order against her and it has stood since then, but the last I heard, she is still screaming at store employees, complaining about money and asking about me and the vehicles. I still am the owner of all 3 vehicles, the Chevelle, the Impala and the Lone Star International, and don't plan on selling any of them. I repair and build computers for a living, but more and more I have been getting into auto repair as a hobby. As I do live in Canada, I do not drive the Impala or Chevelle during winter months, but every year I always take my great aunt, who is now 96 years old, to A&W to get a burger, onion rings and an ice-cold root beer in the Impala, which is something my great uncle did for her since he got the Impala in 1970. A very good friend of my uncle's, who now owns a business, actually rents the Lone Star International from me. He promised me that he would not get a single scratch or spot of rust on any single part of it, and to this day that Lone Star looks factory new and has been all over the world. The guy that rents the truck even continued doing a little tradition my uncle did, which was to get a decal on the truck of the state/province/territory flag of the places the truck has visited. It currently has 31 state decals and 3 province decals on it. My great aunt isn't in great health, and she has told me that she put me in her will so that I will get her cars, which are two of my great uncle's first cars, originally left to her in the will, which are a 1958 Chevrolet Impala and 1957 Plymouth Belvedere Fury, which is my favorite car. I saw the movie Christine when I was 6 years old in 1996, ever since I loved the car, because she knows that I will take care of it and park it right beside the 67 Impala SS. I can already imagine the fallout that I'm going to get for that, so there may even be another post, though I really do hope there is not. Thank you for reading, and I hope you have a great day/evening. Bravo to your family for not putting up with your EA's BS and for recognizing the good person you are. Enjoy your cars as much as humanly possible. OMG, do I ever have car envy. Especially for the Chevelle. Your aunt sounds like a trip to the loony bin. I'm envious about the 67 Impala. Being a Supernatural fan. With that restraining order in effect, and if it is still in force when your great aunt dies, your aunt won't be able to be at any meeting with the lawyer that you are at. If she shows up and refuses to leave, bam, that's a violation of the order. I was kind of wondering how that would work, so thank you. I love the ANW tradition with your great aunt. You sound like a very caring nephew. You should buy your great aunt a little diecast model of a classic car and have her put it in her will to the entitled aunt. Can you imagine the smugness on her face when she'll hear "to the aunt, a fastback Ford Mustang only to be given a little Hot Wheels car"? We need Chevelle, Impala, and Lone Star taxes paid, please and thank you. We'll try to get my brother to take some pictures with his smartphone. I don't have a phone or camera, and my dad just has a flip phone. Lone Star might be an issue because I will have to wait till that's in town, as it's currently going through Montana on its way to Texas right now, By now it will be a running gag to always leave the cars to you and give your aunt a Canadian dollar in epoxy. Ha ha ha. Update: entitled aunt achieves ultra greed status and attempts to steal vehicles will to nephew. EA equals entitled aunt, GA equals great aunt, so I'm not really sure how this is actually done or if I'm doing this right. I looked everywhere and information is kind of limited, so we'll just jump to it. Quite a few things have changed, so to start, GA is doing much better medically and she is looking forward to her 97th birthday. I was actually inspired to make this update because I just recently took her for our usual ANW trip, which she loved. Her mind was also blown that now ANW sells frozen root beer, which had me laughing for about 15 minutes straight because she couldn't understand why someone would want a block of root beer. I had to order one and show her that it's like a icy or a Slurpee. From July 11th. Turns out before he passed away, my great uncle was working on restoring his 1958 Nash Metro, which I think is moderately terrifying because if you crash, that steering column is gonna go right through you and you are going to go through whatever car you crash into, since that thing is a little tank. Gia really doesn't want to hear about the Fury or the Nash anymore, so she gave me the title to the Fury. My cousin really wanted the Nash, which my aunt obliged him, and am not even disappointed because I think that thing is ugly as sin. EA found out about it and threw a fit, was on her way to my house, but without me even knowing this took place. I was surprised to find out that my mom had actually called police and police had called her, EA, to tell her that if she set foot on my property then that would violate the protection order and she would be charged, and so she had best stop the car, turn around and head home. Well, she couldn't get the Plymouth Fury, but by golly she was gonna try to get that Nash Metro. My cousin had called me and told me that she actually went to his house, under the pretense of a pleasant visit, and said that the visit went nicely for maybe an hour, and then suddenly the golem switch was flipped and she started listing off reasons as to why he needs to give her the Nash, such as when she was little she would ride in the Nash, she deserved it, lol, he wouldn't take care of it, also lol, because he has a 66 Pontiac GTO that I have been trying to buy off of him for 7 years, it would be much safer at her place, despite the fact that he lives about 20 miles from where I live in the middle of nowhere. All of these did not faze my cousin, and instead he told her to get out of his house after citing the reason of how it was kinda his dad's car. He had to deal with her pestering him for around 7 months, and then he finally just blocked any form of contact with her. She hasn't tried anything since. GA then went on to sell the farm, which upset EA even more because that's one more thing she can't have, and it is even in the will that my cousin and I retain the vehicles at all times, and now my cousin gets the house in town, which was changed from EA to my cousin, and so the dust has settled now and things are all good. Now some pretty good things have come out of this. So number one is when I found out that my mom was the one that called the police on my aunt, that led me to talk to my mom for the first time in 5 or 6 years, and now we are on speaking terms. I also have a much better relationship with my cousin since we were never really that close to each other to begin with, and he was blown away at the fact that I have a full-on machine shop on my property, so on weekends we will be in the shop talking, and he has been helping me with my project. My project is, I found a Lincoln Continental MK3, and ever since I was a kid it's been a dream to have the car from the movie. Well, the car. So we have started chopping the crap out of it and making everything by hand to get it looking perfect. The Impala, Chevelle and Lone Star are all doing great. The Lone Star had a bit of a hiccup and the entire transmission and engine needed to be replaced, but Lone Star actually said that the engine should have been replaced long ago, so that all got done and signed off on along with a new hitch plate being installed on it. My uncle's friend still rents the Lone Star from me for his business, and he even got a custom decal put on the trailer for it of a chicken hawk. My uncle's nickname was Chicken Hawk, and now has 42 state decals on it, up from 31, and 6 provincial decals, up from 3. Me and my cousin both got invited to a car club because we were at a recent car show. A friend of ours had recent dealings with this car club. They gave him some of the money needed to restore a 1951 Studebaker Woody, and once the car was complete they actually had taken him to court to get the car, which now sits in their showroom. So me and my cousin asked them when our friend is gonna get his Studebaker back, and then I said that I don't associate with people that have zero moral fiber. We are now working towards getting him his car back, since legally the people in the car club can't so much as sit in the car without our friend's permission. Since nothing was in writing, he has to pay the car club back, but won't get the car back until he has paid the car club because his lawyer was an idiot. Before I forget, EA has actually had to come out of retirement, and now both her and her boyfriend are forced to go back to work since they ran out of money pretty quick. As it turns out, having multiple homes and going on vacation 2 and 3 times per year drains your bank account pretty darn quick. So yeah, that's about it. 5 a.m. so it's time to get to work. Hope everyone out there has a good day/evening, and thank you for your time. I love a happy ending. Yup, but I don't get how she has learned nothing from last time. After her behavior, her getting nothing is still more than she deserves. While that's a great ending, you should update your will ASAP and encourage your cousin to do the same. Yet each should leave her a Canadian dollar in plastic to rub salt in the wound, and tell her $1 is still way more than she deserves. After reading your original post, I was happy that EA got what she deserves. She was definitely a Karen that wants your cars that your uncle gave to you in his will, and I'm willing to bet that she would have sold those machines for a quick buck. She was a mega Karen, and I agree, she probably would have sold them. But she fucked around and found out. Good for everyone. Entitled Aunt gets what for, your family gets closer, and Great Aunt gets her root beer. May she be around to get root beer on her 100th B-Day. Please let us know how your friend makes out with the car club situation. I'm assuming y'all got security cameras and etc. all installed, because I bet you this is not going to be the last update if the EA has to come out of retirement, lol. She might amp up the crazy even more. Though hopefully the restraining order and etc. will make her think twice, but you never know how crazy people will react. Getting cameras set up at your machine shop and wherever you park your cars might be prudent as a just-in-case measure. EA has already been through 2 jobs and got fired from each. Now she's driving a school bus and has been for I think the last 2 months, before summer break. And you better bet that I got security cameras all over my shop and house. LMAO. The way you take care of your great aunt and everyone who loved and respected your uncle is incredible. Karma, the most patient gangster ever. I'm glad they got what they deserve. You are not wrong about the dangers of the Nash in an accident. I'm pretty sure my grandmother was driving a Nash when a truck hit her on her way home to OH from a trip she'd made to FL. It was 1962 and the steering wheel did, in fact, detach. She was impaled on the steering column. Granted, she may also have been clocked in the back of the head by one or more of the clay flower pots she had lined up in the back window, but it was the impalement that killed her. The fact that it was built like a tank did not save it from the truck. I remember that, as a young child, I made many trips to FL with my folks while they dealt with the lawsuits against the truck driver and his company. If you made it to the end of the video, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share, and we will see you in the next video.